Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. From livestock shows to the rides and games, the food, and of course those blue ribbons and seeing old friends. There's nothing like the county fair to bring communities across Oklahoma together this time of year. We'll have more from here in Stevens County a little later in the show. But first, perspective on fall wheat planting. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our Extension Small Grain Specialist, Jeff Edwards.
We've worked our way through most of August, and Jeff, producers are thinking about planting wheat right now. What should producers be thinking about in the fields?
Well, one critical thing they need to think about is controlling volunteer grasses such as volunteer wheat or corn, because those can harbor the wheat curl mite, which is a vector for wheat streak mosaic. The thing to remember about wheat streak mosaic is that there are no curative actions you can take for wheat streak mosaic. It's all preventative. That prevention starts now by controlling those volunteer grasses, making sure that any volunteer grasses are dead 2 weeks prior to planting. So you have to have that green bridge broken 2 weeks prior to planting. We had a lot of disease last year, and that's just one of them, but it's one that we need to focus on right now.
What about soil fertility issues in the ground?
Well, we need to be pulling soil samples on our wheat fields. Now, I know it's hot, you know, the ground is dried out, it's hard to pull those samples, but a few hours pulling soil samples can literally save you thousands of dollars in your operation. With the year that we had last year, we may have lost some of that residual nitrogen in the soil. You need to have a good handle on what type of fertility program that you're going to need for the coming year. And it's also a good time to start thinking about putting out those nitrogen-rich strips. They're a great tool, low cost, but they can save you thousands upon thousands of dollars. 2015
was the year of fungicide. Either you had it or you didn't. Do you think 16 is going to be the same way?
Who knows? Who knows? Those that did not have fungicide in 2015 wished that they had. So who knows what type of year we're going to have. Fortunately, we have good partnerships with the folks to the south of us. We can monitor that foliar disease and kind of get some indication of what type of a disease year we're going to have in the spring. What growers need to focus on right now is looking at the various characteristics of varieties that they are considering and their reactions to foliar disease. Ruby Lee is a prime example. If you plant Ruby Lee this fall, you need to be prepared to spray a fungicide next spring. If they're talking a lot of stripe rust to the south of us, then you're locked in. You need to spray the fungicide and really protect that crop. If that's not something that you're willing to do, then you need to consider a different variety, something like Billings, something like Gallagher that has a stronger disease resistance package. Plant something like that. So I'm not saying that you have to commit to spraying the fungicide right now, but you have to consider whether or not it's something that you're willing to do. If you're not willing to do it, there are some varieties you need to avoid.
Some of the producers are going to go graze and grain, and they're going to be planting soon. What are some of the things that they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, we'll start planting wheat here in the southern plains here at the end of the month for our grazing systems. A few things those producers need to think about. We've kind of seen a resurgence of Hessian fly in recent years. If I'm going to plant early and I need a variety that is resistant to Hessian fly, we have Duster, Gallagher, Everest. There are some varieties that are resistant. The other thing that we're going to need to do is make sure we have a good fertility program out there to ensure we have adequate forage growth. It's going to take about 30 pounds of nitrogen to produce 1,000 pounds of forage. Most of our producers, if they start out with about 60 to 80 pounds of nitrogen in the soil, they'll be in decent shape. The other thing they need to consider is seeding rate. A lot of our dual-purpose producers will seed at about 90 pounds per acre. If you want more forage more quickly, up that seeding rate to 2 bushels or even 150 pounds per acre if you can stand the seed costs, and you'll have more forage more quickly by doing that. You'll also use up the moisture more quickly, right. So it's a double-edged sword.
And hopefully we'll have that soil moisture that we had earlier in the year. It's starting to wean off a little bit, but you know, it could work out.
It could. We still have some moisture in the subsoil. Again, controlling those weeds, volunteer weeds, they wick that moisture out of the soil. Get rid of those weeds to make sure that we don't lose moisture due to that. Save every drop. If El Nino continues and the forecasts are correct and we have a fairly mild and wet fall, could be a great year for forage production, but I would manage my moisture like we're going to have another drought.
You always should. Thank you much, Jeff. Jeff Edwards, small grain specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
On the subject of wheat, pre-treating seed before planting is especially important this year to slow down a type of fungus that hasn't been seen in Oklahoma since 1925. Extension wheat pathologist Bob Hunger explains.
Well, I'm here today to talk a little bit about a bit of an unseen disease in Oklahoma, but one that definitely can have consequences in the state in terms of wheat production. The ones that most growers are familiar with are loose smut and common bunt, which is also called stinking smut. These are diseases that used to be historically extremely important in the state in terms of wheat production, but because of the advent of seed treatments through the 50s and 60s and then the current seed treatments, they can pretty much be done away with if seed treatments are used consistently. However, what did happen in the state north of us is that another smut was found, which is called flag smut. Now this is another one of these smut bunt fungi diseases that can cause problems in terms of wheat production. The young seedling gets infected and the fungus of the smut or bunt fungus will grow with the plant, and with loose smut and common bunt, the symptoms will be expressed when the heads start coming out. Instead of having a nice healthy head of wheat, you'll have bunted kernels or just a big black mass of loose powdery spores. Now in the case of flag smut, you get very severe twisting of the leaves, and the spores actually come out on the leaves rather than on the head of the wheat itself. So there's a little bit of a difference between flag smut and the other two bunts and smuts that we have here in Oklahoma. However, there was an outbreak of it this year, and it was found in close to 20 counties in Kansas, primarily across northwestern Kansas, but also down towards the central part of the state as well. We didn't find any in Oklahoma, but we really didn't look for it because our wheat had already turned and was harvested by the time it really came out that flag smut was being found in Kansas. But I wanted to bring this to the attention of growers because the way to resolve all of these problems with the bunts and smuts is to treat your wheat seed with a good compound, and any of the compounds work well against all of these smuts and bunts. And those are the ones that need to really be watched for in terms of this disease. If you had a field where you saw either loose smut or common bunt, or if by chance there was flag smut in it, you would not want to use that for seed wheat unless you absolutely had no other choice. And definitely if you do use it for seed wheat, it should be treated with one of the fungicides, but there's nothing you can do after you have it in the field.
And for more information on what Bob talked about, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Whoa! Someone turned off the heat lamp this week. Lows in the 50s, highs in the 70s, and our summer crops, cotton, peanuts, okra, and watermelons, need typical summer heat to mature. How dramatic was the change? The maximum air temperature map from Tuesday afternoon had lots of air temperatures in the 90s. In the darker red areas, temperatures climbed into the upper 90s. Eric, Hollis, Tipton, Granfield, Mangum, and Kingfisher all hit 100 degrees. Tuesday's maximum air temperature map had no red-colored areas. The highest air temperature was 85 degrees, recorded at Tipton, Granfield, and Bernieville. The high at Jay only made it to 69 degrees. That steep drop in air temperature showed up dramatically on a graph of air temperatures for kingfisher. Monday, a high of 97. Tuesday, the air temperature hit 100. Wednesday, the maximum air temperature at kingfisher was 76 degrees. Tuesday brought the count of our days at 100 or higher to 22 at Tipton, the most in the state so far this summer. Close behind are Hobart with 19 days at or above 100, Tipton at 18 days, Hollis and Buffalo with 17 days, and Grandfield with 16 100-plus days. There are still 25 Mesonet sites out of 119 total locations that have not had a single 100-degree day this summer. Our rainfall on Wednesday provided some pretty good amounts for areas to the southwest and northeast. All of the green areas had 1 or more inches of rain. Eric in the west recorded 1 82/100 inches. 3 Mesonet sites collected over 3 inches of rain: Burbank, Tulsa, and Stigler. The yellow map areas had 4 or more inches of rain. Looking at rain over the last 30 days from June 20th to August 19th, the blue-colored areas are the ones that have really come up short, commonly less than 1/2 inch of rain. One of the higher rainfall areas was out in the Panhandle. The Boise City Mesonet site collected 7 61/100 inches of rain from mid-July to mid-August. Over in the east, Cookson recorded 9 31/100 through Wednesday evening. Poor Medill and Antlers had only 1/10 of an inch from June 20th through August 19th. The lower rainfall areas over the last 30 days are the areas on our map of soil moisture at the 10-inch depth colored dark brown. These are the areas with fractional water index values at 1 to 2/10. Fractional water index goes from 0, bone dry, to 1, saturated. Dropping down to 24 inches, we see more moisture in the soil, more green-colored areas and less dark brown. This means most of our deeper-rooted plants still have some moisture they can draw on to finish out the summer growing season. And these soil moisture maps don't show the impacts of Wednesday's rains. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Producers in some parts of the state are considering sprouted wheat as an option for feeding their cows. And joining us now is Dave Lallman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist. And Dave, tell us what you're hearing about sprouted wheat this year.
Apparently there's some of it available in different parts of the state. Primarily seems like the eastern part of the state, but it's not uniform in its presence, even in the eastern part of the state. So the question would be then, what is its value, and particularly for, my interests or expertise would be relative to cattle feed.
So in terms of nutrition, if producers can get their hands on some sprouted wheat, what kind of things should they consider?
One thing they should consider would be the test weight, and generally speaking it's going to be lighter test weight. If it's 50 pounds per bushel or above, most of the studies would say that it's pretty good quality feed. Feeds much like 60 pound per bushel test weight wheat. So in other words, marginal low test weight doesn't hinder or reduce the feed value. The second thing that they're going to be a little bit concerned about is the presence of aflatoxin or vomitoxin. The fortunate thing about feeding it to cattle is cattle, because they have a rumen, have the ability to detoxify those things to some extent. And so some of those co-ops in eastern Oklahoma have found marginal levels of vomitoxin in the sprouted wheat. As long as it's under about 10 parts per million in the test, it should be a pretty good cattle feed. Probably would suggest that if it's at the close to that 10 parts per million threshold, that it probably ought to only be included around 50% of the concentrate portion of the diet.
And in your experience, the cattle seem to like it.
They do. It is very palatable, and cattle perform well on sprouted wheat. So it has quite a bit of value as a feed resource.
And then if the price is right too, we have to consider that.
Most of it would have been discounted when it was received at the mill or the co-op, and those discounts are probably actually an opportunity for a cattle producer to take advantage of, because it should feed better than what the discount might suggest.
Okay. Another thing while we have you here to talk about is an upcoming educational opportunity for cattle producers, a cow-calf symposium. Talk about that.
Yes, ma'am. On September 17th and 18th, Oklahoma State University, and particularly the Animal Science Department, is hosting the Ing Foundation Cow-Calf Symposium. The general idea for the work that foundation is facilitating is that land prices are getting higher, the population is growing, and so what are some ways that we can increase productivity of cow-calf herds in light of those factors? But it's going to be an interesting, very interesting symposium where we'll talk about nutrition, we'll talk about animal health when you maybe using semi-confinement, how we can use a program like this to improve pasture conditions, better manage pastures. So a lot of interesting and unique concepts.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dave Lallman. And for more information on the symposium as well as sprouted wheat, just go to sunup.okstate.edu. Oklahoma wheat prices have dropped about $1.35 since the end of June. And here for perspective is Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist. And Kim, give us an idea of what's been going on.
Well, before we talk about current conditions, let's go back to May and June of 2010. At that point in time, wheat prices in Oklahoma were at $3.50 in mid-June of 2010. If you look at the world production, it was projected to be 24.7 billion bushels, a near record. Every report, I don't care if it was an analyst estimate or the USDA WASDE, from that point on lowered the world production estimates, and with lower production estimates the price started going up. Then another thing that was going on in 2010 was the value of the dollar, that index relative to other currencies, was in the 75 to 80 level, significantly lower than now. Prices went from $3.50 in June to $6.20 on September 1 and were $8.90 by February. This year we're having just the opposite happen. We're nearly every report come out, if it's an analyst report or if it's the USDA report, raises world wheat production. We've had higher increases in Germany and France, the European Union, Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Australia, Argentina. Around the world, every report that comes out raises production, and as production estimates go up, the price of wheat goes down. Also, if you look at that index of the dollar, it's running around 96, 97 points, 20-25% higher than in 2010, and that's another $1.25 to $1.50 lower price that we have now. Higher wheat production, lower prices.
Lots of things that contribute. Now, in terms of the 2015 crop, how much of that has been sold currently?
Well, I've got a unscientific survey. In other words, I visited with a few local elevators. They say that as a percentage, they've got a higher percentage of wheat in the bins for the 2015 harvest than they did in 2014. Of course, we've about doubled our production and harvest this year, so we got twice as much in the bin. But what that tells me is that we've still got a lot of wheat in the bin for farmers to sell, and that also is a negative for Oklahoma prices.
For those thinking about selling in the future, what are your price expectations then?
Well, as we've said, sell on the rallies. So we're going to have some price rallies. It looks like the price is building a floor right now. It's wallowing around. If we break it, we've probably got maybe a 30-cent downside potential. The odds against it going down, I'd say, is about 60% that it's going to go up and 40% that it's going to go down. So if I was a producer, I would stagger my wheat into the market, set me a price target and a date, and I'd move it in between now and, say, January, February time period.
Okay, good advice. Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Every year in August, I like to remind those cow-calf producers in Oklahoma that have fall calving herds that they want to expect the start of calving season to come just a little bit sooner than what the gestation tables might suggest. You see, research was done here at Oklahoma State University by Dr. Wedeman and some of his graduate students several years ago, where they looked at cows that actually calved during the hot part of summer in August and compared that to cows that calved in a cooler part of the fall starting in late October into November. He did this 2 separate years, and what he found was that the cows that calved in August the first year had an average gestation length 6 days shorter than their counterparts that calved in cooler weather. The second year, the difference was 4 days. So that we can kind of expect, by looking at this research, that on the average, we need to expect fall calving cows to calve about 5 days sooner than what the book might suggest. It should be someplace in the neighborhood of about 278 days average gestation length, as compared to a book estimate of 283 days. So, here we are towards the middle and the last part of August. That tells me that if we've got some fall calving cows, especially some first calf heifers that we expect to calve around the 1st of September, we'd better be out there looking and checking to make sure that if they're in the throes of labor and they need some assistance, that we can provide it. If you'd like to read that research that was done back in about 2003 and 4, I'd suggest you go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu. Look under show links, and we'll put a link there to that research report. I think it's very, very interesting study that was done that tells us that we better expect the average gestation length of these fall calving cows to be a little bit shorter than what we might expect on those same cows in the springtime. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Producers are thinking about planting wheat right now, and Daryl, let's talk about some of the cattle that will be grazing on that wheat later this year.
Well, stocker producers are, we're close to planting it. We're thinking about buying stocker cattle for the fall. We could be buying these calves anytime in the next month to 2 months. And so there's a couple questions out there. Obviously, one of them is what are we going to have to pay for these calves this fall that we buy for grazing? We've still got very strong prices. It looks like we're going to continue with that, but we also know that in a longer term sense, this cattle market is kind of turning the corner here. We see bigger numbers ahead of us. At some point in time, there's going to be some erosion of prices. Probably won't happen this fall. So I think stocker producers probably can take today's prices as a pretty good indication of what it's going to cost. If you look at the value of gain that's implied in today's market prices, it's pretty attractive from a stocker producer standpoint.
Well, let's talk about the market in your crystal ball whenever the cattle come off of the wheat, say in the spring.
That raises that question even more then. At some point in time, there's going to be some pressure on these prices. And the real question is, do we turn that corner before then? How much downside risk might there be on these feeder cattle between now and next spring? Certainly the futures market doesn't give you very much to work with right now, so it's hard to go out and price those cattle. We're taking a certain amount of risk buying them this fall and counting on that market to be there. There's really no way to know. I guess we have to be a little bit careful. I think we'll still have a pretty strong market. I think it's going to work out fine this fall, but there is clearly more downside risk in this market at some point in time. Producers need to be aware of that.
So let's talk about the market for the calves that are going to be sold this fall.
Our spring-born calves will be coming to town this fall, and same story. I mean, the cow-calf sales this fall are the flip side of the stocker purchase decision. So, again, the question is how much, downside potential is there in this market? I really don't think there's a lot this fall. Even though, again, feeder supplies are up, we know over time we're going to build cattle numbers. It's not going to happen much before the end of this year, I don't think. So I think cow-calf producers are going to enjoy good, strong prices, not as high as a year ago. That was probably the peak, but we're going to see the second highest net returns for cow-calf producers based on these fall 2015 calf sales.
Let's talk about the price of cattle right now, and then also rebuilding the herd, how that could play together.
Well, again, we've turned that corner. We are in herd rebuilding unless something changes it. Right. Of course, next year's another year, so things could change. But assuming that doesn't, we are clearly building, and you know, eventually we are going to add supplies and pressure this market. I think that's a longer-term process. You know, it's just barely starting now. It'll grow a bit in 2016. There'll be a little more pressure, but still good, strong prices. It's going to be 2017 into 2018 probably before we get to a point where we, you know, have more significant pressure on prices in general in the cattle market.
Okay, thank you much. Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Finally today, the county fair is a joyous and energetic few days for so many families this time of year. As part of SUNUP's County Fair series, we show you why Stevens County is such a draw. The fair is coming to life again in Duncan, Oklahoma, just as it has for 108 years.
That seems like a long time, and in fact, I'm quite sure it is, and I can say that I've not seen all of them.
Max has seen the past 25, however.
Near the north end of the arena.
On a brief tour, the county extension director tells us the fair keeps getting better.
How we've kind of changed with the times, some of the different things that we see as far as exhibits, and maybe even the cycles that we see as far as, you know, whether it be livestock or it be entries inside the exhibit building.
15-year-old Murray Powers is a 4-H'er from Loco, who clearly put some time in preparing for this day.
My favorite part about the fair is going and seeing the craftsmanship and the skill that others have exhibited and seeing a variety of ideas presented by the contestants there.
Another draw, fruits and vegetables. We admire them all, either fresh from the garden or beautifully canned. Dozens of volunteers are the backbone of the fair, dedicated to keeping it all running smoothly. Folding, straightening, documenting each and every entry to best display the craftsmanship and creativity of both the young and the more seasoned from across Stevens County.
You look forward to seeing other friends from around the county and stuff, and that's exactly the same way with these kids. They come here, they have a great time, they participate and they learn, and anybody will tell you, you know, that's what makes it all worth what you do.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.